All right, so next up we have Katherine Johnson. Katherine is originally from California, but spent time in Washington, D.C., Portland, Oregon, before moving to Laramie in 2019 to teach as an assistant lecturer in the Learn program in the English department at UW. Questions surrounding democracy captured her attention as political polarization increased over the past decade, and she's witnessed how hard it can be for people to effectively and productively communicate across the political spectrum and solve real problems by working together. So give it up for Katherine.
Oh, there we go. Okay, great. Thank you. And I just want to thank everyone that made this possible. And thank you, Robbie, especially for all the work that you've done to make this happen. I really, really appreciate it. So this is my presentation, Amor, Mundi, Love and Politics, with James Baldwin and Hannah Arendt. In George W. Bush's 2009 farewell address to the country, he used the word love 3 times. In President Obama's farewell address to the country, he used the word love 3 times. And in President Biden's inaugural address and farewell address, he used it 4 times. In President Trump's speech to a joint session of Congress on March 4th of this year, he invoked love 21 times. And Trump's invocation of love has been notable in other contexts. He said of his meeting with North Korea's Kim Jong-un, "We fell in love." He remarked that Putin wanted to rebuild the Soviet Union, which was a country where there was a lot of love. And of the crowd at the Capitol building on January 6th, he said, "There was a lot of love out there. There was tremendous love." What does this mean, if anything? And does it beg the question, what is the role of love in politics? My interest in love and politics actually started a long time ago with James Baldwin. Baldwin was a prolific essayist, novelist, and civil rights activist. He kept company with Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. He was the son of a preacher and even became a preacher himself as a teenager until he became disillusioned by the hypocrisy he saw in his church. And his essay, Notes of a Native Son, transformed how I think about the personal and the political and the necessity of love in healing the country's crime of slavery and lingering racism. But his point wasn't just so much about loving others as it was about not being destroyed by hatred. He presents the reader with a confounding challenge to both accept men as they are and life as it is, and to never stop fighting injustice, but to do so from a place of love, not hatred. Hannah Arendt is a political philosopher that I didn't know much about until recently. She was born in 1906 in Germany, and after being arrested by the Gestapo for researching anti-Semitism, she fled to France and then to the United States. You might know her from the phrase, "the banality of evil," which refers to how normal people who don't think for themselves can succumb to a complacency that enables evil, like the Holocaust. Arendt's work famously focused on the nature of wealth, power, and totalitarianism, but love was also a recurring theme in her work, and a point of contention between Baldwin and Arendt. In 1962, James Baldwin published the essay Letter from a Region in My Mind in the New Yorker magazine. It would later be published as the book The Fire Next Time. In this piece, he describes his fallout with Christianity when he learned that his church didn't practice the idea of loving one's loving one's enemy. He describes the painful and ongoing fight for civil rights, and yet his inability to embrace the Nation of Islam movement because it would require him to hate his white friends. And he returns again and again to love as an essential, liberating force for true progress. He writes, "All of us know, whether or not we are able to admit it, that mirrors can only lie, that death by drowning is all that awaits one there. It is for this reason that love is so desperately sought and so cunningly avoided. Love takes off the masks that we fear we cannot live without and know we cannot live within." I use the word love here not merely in the personal sense, but as a state of being or a state of grace, not in the infantile American sense of being made happy, but in the tough and universal sense of quest and daring and growth. Upon publication, Arendt wrote him this letter, both praising his essay as a political event of a very high order, but then she says that she is frightened by his gospel of love. She says, in politics, love is a stranger, and when it intrudes upon it, nothing is being achieved except hypocrisy. She concludes that hatred and love belong together, and they are both destructive. You can afford them only in the private, and as a people, only so long as you are not free. I didn't understand what she meant and how she could possibly object to Baldwin's advocacy for love. But her criticism made me realize that I had actually taken Baldwin's word as gospel, as irrefutable, sacred. I admire him so deeply and have been so moved by his work that I didn't want to question him. But Baldwin believed his job as a writer was to never stop questioning, including and perhaps especially himself. And so to actually do Baldwin justice required that I understand Arendt's criticism and take it seriously, and most importantly, think for myself. To understand why Arendt has a problem with love in politics, we have to understand what she means by politics. According to Arendt, politics deals with the coexistence and association of different men. It is the set of conditions under which humans in their plurality, in their differences from one another, live together and speak freely with one another. Plurality is essential. She writes, politics is based on the fact of human plurality. Plurality both relates us to and distinguishes us from one another. Imagine, for example, a table with people seated around that table. They are both separated from one another and connected to one another by the table. In other words, they maintain their uniqueness as individuals, and they are brought together by a shared humanity. It's crucial that both of those things are happening at the same time, and without this plurality, there is no politics. And for Arendt, love threatens this plurality, and that's because she primarily sees two types of love. The first, neighborly love, is a problem because it erases differences and encourages us to love everyone equally. The other love, intimate love, is a problem because it emphasizes differences and encourages us to love unequally. Both of these loves threaten the essential conditions of politics because they erase either plurality or our shared humanity. Instead, she offers Amor, Mundi, a love of the world, which is a loving orientation toward the world. It's like loving the table, the space between us, the world between us, instead of loving just the people at the table. Only then, according to Arendt, can the conditions of politics be maintained. So James Baldwin never responded to Arendt publicly that we know of, so we don't know his response. I'm inclined to think that Arendt thought Baldwin was advocating for the neighborly love that flattens difference between people, and that's why she was frightened. But Baldwin was very clear about also holding people and individuals accountable for their actions, for both seeing human plurality and a shared humanity. That said, Arendt's warning feels prescient and relevant. It can be dangerous to evoke love in politics, especially if it is used, or perhaps because it can only be used, to manipulate or divide people. I've come to think that Baldwin and Arendt are not at odds with one another as much as they are in conversation with one another. They model a dialogue that together offers a fuller picture of love in politics, its possibilities, and its destructiveness. While Baldwin provides a useful, even spiritual framework for engaging with other people, Arendt's loving orientation toward the world requires us to see the bigger picture. But what does this look like in practice? This is complicated, but I think Arendt offers at least one part of the answer: free speech. For Arendt, free speech was an essential part of politics, for those people sitting at the table that connects and divides. She wrote, "The key thing is not that a person can say whatever he pleases. The point is rather that we know from experience that no one can adequately grasp the objective world in its full reality all on his own, because the world always shows and reveals itself to him from only one perspective, which corresponds to his standpoint in the world and is determined by it. Only in the freedom of our speaking with one another does the world, as that about which we speak, emerge in its objectivity and visibility from all sides. Living in a real world and speaking with one another about it are basically one and the same." Arendt believed that the world emerged through people from different perspectives coming together and sharing their ideas through speech. This interaction for her was politics. But I contend that in 2025, free speech is not enough. When Baldwin and Arendt were writing, the looming existential threat was the atom bomb and humanity's newfound ability to annihilate itself. Today, we still have that to worry about, and we also have the internet. In an environment in which speech is freer than it has ever been, we are also suffering from its excess. But this is not an argument to limit free speech any more than the Constitution already allows. It's an argument that the quality of our speech and the quality of our thought matters. Thought and speech that is not curious and truthful, that does not see the individual and the shared humanity, that does not illuminate, question, interrogate, wonder, and criticize, will not sustain a functioning, let alone a flourishing, democracy. For Baldwin, loving one's country and criticizing her were not mutually exclusive, but spiritually necessary. He wrote, "I think that it is a spiritual disaster to pretend that one doesn't love one's country. You may disapprove of it, you may be forced to leave it, you may live your whole life as a battle, yet I don't think you escape it. There isn't any other place to go. You don't pull up your roots and put them down someplace else. If you try to pretend you don't see the immediate reality that formed you, I think you'll go blind." In a sense, to love is to see reality for all that it contains. It's also important to remember that the freedom that Arendt equated with politics included a freedom to listen as well as to speak, the freedom to hear from the other people at the table and deepen your own understanding of reality. Perhaps the clearest way we can orient ourselves toward the world in love, Amor Mundi, is to think and speak freely. Arendt described this thinking as thinking without banisters. She wrote, "As you go up and down the stairs, you can always hold on to the banister so that you don't fall down. But we have lost this banister. I always thought that one has got to start thinking as though nobody has thought before and then start learning from everybody else. Only in thinking for ourselves can we avoid the banality of evil that ends in atrocity." So at a time where we may have seemingly little control or power, we have complete control over the quality of our thoughts and words. But as Baldwin wrote to his nephew, don't take my word for anything. Don't take anyone's word for anything, including mine. I only suggest that we, as Arendt said, think what we are doing. Let go of the banister. Thank you.